All right. Welcome, everyone. I am Mike Zyda, and today is the Digital Hollywood panel entitled Creative Boundaries Without Mind, as we put together last time. I think this was Brand's suggestion. We have Brand Farron here, who is co-founder and chief creative officer of Applied Minds, Academy Award winner and former president of R&D at Walt Disney. Diana Colella, who is Executive Vice President and Head of Media and Entertainment at Autodesk. We have Flip Phillips, animation pioneer from Pixar. Now he's a professor at the School of Film and Animation at Rochester Institute of Technology. And we have Marlon Prager, who is the CEO of Mirrors. And I'm going to put up briefly a, a slide here that we can look at that is kind of, all right, here we are. The themes that we're going to go through today are story and concept and creativity and virtual production and post and in production and customer attention, streaming and delivery in the film industry at the time of large language models. We have a massive impact of AI that is knocking on our door. And with respect to story and concept, we have people writing screenplays using tools that are augmented by large language models. One of them, cyberfilm.ai, I'm advisor for. And you can, with that tool as it's configured right now, you can specify your characters, your locations, and your plots and your subplots across 5 to 10 seasons of television series. And it will help you author the scenes as you say, I want these two characters, they're in a bar, and I want them to deal with this subplot, and it will author that scene for you, and you can go fix it yourself. It's a tool that's very much like Final Draft. This also has the capability to be Story Bible using ChatGPT and other large language model support, and you're seeing that happening now. You're seeing concept art go off to things like Midjourney, go off to ChatGPT or Grok, and you can get rapid backdrop and set and avatar creation out of these right now. You can get 3 models built out of these, 3D models. In terms of virtual production, sort of the future is LED panel walls and beyond. You're seeing people put together backdrops that are made to run in a game engine that are on the LED panel wall, and the real actors are sitting at a table inside of a restaurant with chairs, and the waiter comes over and you shoot at them with the backdrop of this panel wall, and it looks like you're shooting out in the real world. With AI, we're going to get to a realistic lighting match very quickly. You'll be able to instantly change the backgrounds if they're not appropriate, if the director wants to change. We can shoot this in high resolution right away. You can do camera placement support, live lens and camera and angle placement, and everything is changing rapidly with large language models and AI and some of these large panel walls. Post and in production, you're going to get daily reviews quickly from this process. You're going to be able to do editing, color gradation, and correction and visual effects basically in real time. It's during production. You can shoot your scene and then change it right there and put it up on screen. And you're going to have multi-language and cultural animation integration. There's a company that's called Pinscreen that does this right now, and they use large language models to change it from English to Chinese and change the animation of the lips and the facial structures so that it looks like someone is really speaking Chinese. You're going to have large customer understanding and retention. You're going to have ChatGPT AIs that can listen and interact with customers. You're going to have ChatGPT Alexa-like integration. You're going to have virtual movie friends. You're going to have streaming and delivery, where basically it looks like movie theaters maybe go away. We hope not. But you're going to have crypto-based smart contracts that are going to be able to track residuals of all of the people who've contributed to the film or television show's production. And it's going to be done in a rather easy fashion. So the big thing today is to talk about creativity and how large language models will impact creativity. And I think I'm going to hand this off to Brand Farron. Brand.
Well, anytime we have some radical new thing enter our lives, certainly in technology, it's going to, on one level, change everything, and on the other level, change nothing. And so, the creative process of how do you come up with a compelling idea? How do you convey that and connect it to people? I mean, it's important, I think, to reflect on the fact that we're talking about intersecting technology with art in a variety of art forms. And people often mistake art as being about decoration or in some way prettying something up. But art is a different language and allows you to say things in ways that you can't in any other language. And film is simply an extension of that. The idea of virtual sets and such giving you the ability to set a period piece in New York City at the turn of the century and do that affordably without having to find every turn of the century horse and buggy and first automobiles and all of that is very appealing because it now means that you could actually afford to do something that otherwise you couldn't. At the same time, if you look at the abuses of new technologies, and I think my former field, visual effects, is a good example of this. You look at a typical film now in our division of the Academy, which, may have 2,000 to 3,000 visual effects shots in it. When I started in the business, if you had 60 or 100, that was quite a few shots and so forth. Has it made films better? Has it given us the ability to tell stories in a way that's superior? And the answer is, of course, yes and no. It's enabled a certain set of visions to be realized by skilled practitioners. At the same time, my concern is always that there has to be heart and passion and people who have important messages to tell and an audience that is interested in receiving that. The cartoon from years ago when students started not showing up in class but having tape recorders. And eventually you saw just an entire classroom full of tape recorders, no students. And then the last frame is a tape recorder on the podium, which is broadcasting to an entire room of tape recorders. I think the challenge that we face in all of this is how do we explore the creative possibilities? How do we become cognizant of the fact that this will impact people's lives and careers and that? And at the same time, if we are doing this as part of our creative service to art and the arts, we do have an obligation to actually think about, are we simply taking technology and using it to emulate other people's great works? And is that a contribution or is that a distraction? And so I think the challenge remains as new generations of filmmakers and existing ones become more and more comfortable and explore these new technologies. What we all have to do is pay attention and see which of them are beneficial, which of them are contributing. And at the same time, be prepared for the fact that there is going to be a degraded signal to noise ratio as all of this stuff gets started, whereby there's going to be a lot of junk and a lot of stuff which isn't that great and a lot of stuff which is kind of a distraction. But there's nothing wrong with that. That happens every time we have a new medium. And if you look at the introduction of film, let's just go back to this. At first, it was novelty. It was a train running people over in the audience. It was a collection of other things. You didn't really have to think very hard because it was novelty. We are at the pre-novelty phase now of the impact of AI on motion picture production. We will go through a series of abuses and a series of great triumphs, and then what will emerge is a new set of creative and technical tools which should work to everybody's benefit.
Right. Sounds good. Flip, I want to put you in here, right?
Yes. Yeah, we one of the things that I mean, and I'm going to echo a lot of things that Brand said, mainly because we roughly contemporaneous humans and have seen similar kind of trajectories. I'm also, though, going to talk a little bit from the standpoint as an educator, as someone who's kind of trying to crank people through a system to help them learn and understand what these things are. And I, I mean, I date back in this particular field to the early 1980s, and the where I was an architecture student when I, as an undergraduate, and the idea of computer graphics in general was still very, it was a domain specific kind of thing, was used a lot in CAD and everything. Um, I did research in radiology with a group who were wildly afraid of the end of the radiologist because what was going to happen was computers can do, you're a radiologist, you're trained how to think in 3 dimensions from a bunch of 2-dimensional images. And we made a system that let you just combine those. You could see them, Oh, not going to need a radiologist anymore. Clearly, as if you're, out, if you're, we did not eliminate radiology. We've changed the way that some of it is done for sure. There's not as much time spent in the in a dark room and developing, and we're not different types of radiation and things like that. But it's not like these people went away. A similar thing happened when at Pixar we released our tools, RenderMan specifically, and I remember people talking about you've given away the family jewels, even you're selling it, and so you're giving up on making strong narrative and everything. And the joke was that for computer people out there, there's a program called Make that you use for building software. And the joke, still have a slide here somewhere of Make Film. It's not like that was going to happen, right? We were selling tools for blandishment. We were selling tools for rendering, but it certainly wasn't composing stories, and it wasn't even making the rendering part of it particularly efficient or anything. It was just the way that we did it. And if you wanted to use our pencils, you could use our pencils. So again, back to Brand's point, back to your point in the beginning, these things, there's a lot of sky is falling feeling out there, and I have to deal with it with students a lot. It's like, oh, I need to learn all this stuff so I can do it. But the reality is, just like, again, let's go back to the 80s and 90s, we were going to have synthetic actors. And right. And again, no disrespect to the people who were trying these things, because that's how we pushed a lot of this stuff forward, right? But it certainly didn't replace one of my friends is responsible for the hologram, the Snoop Dogg or not Snoop Dogg, the various actor type hologram systems for concerts. It's like, good on you for doing this, but you're not recreating, they're not taking actors' roles and things like that, because it's harder than we thought or harder than predicted, and people panicked. And so I'm kind of here to bring us back down to, yes, it's not gonna be a universal replacement for everything, from concept to delivery. It's going to change how those things work. But and again, if you're on the student side, it helps to understand where these things are good for you and where these things are not good for you. And so that's kind of my pitch on how this stuff goes.
All right, Marlon, you're there.
Yeah, no, thanks for arranging this. So I'm a bit more, the answer is yes, new technology creates new opportunities. But I am a little more contrarian. And I love the radiological example Flip brought up. There was a recent study out of the schools, one in North Carolina. It was either Duke University, North Carolina, one of the schools. And it's still early days, so there's going to be a lot of research on this. But the gist was radiologists 78% effective, with the use of AI 90% effective. However, if it was just AI directly without the radiologists involved at all, it was like 98% effective, right? This is we are in a sea change, and it is incredibly powerful, and we don't know. And I think the disruption could be very impactful, where you may have, some kid in the Midwest somewhere competing against Chris Nolan, making a movie that you may be able to replace actors with virtual actors and not tell the difference. I think the tools are getting so good, in that, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I envision a world where you see two movies side by side and you will not be able to tell the difference for something that was completely generated through AI, generative AI, and it was actually filmed with people and cameras and things of that nature. And the other reason, I still go back to, my days as CFO, looking at just the overall economics where the industry is today, where it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And the economics aren't great today. And it's in large part being driven by you're competing with YouTube and, online content, which dwarfs any of the content in terms of eyeballs that are coming out of the studios or even the streamers, right? So you're gonna have a ton of content, but the notion of, a top tier director like Steven Spielberg, all of a sudden some kid, in his garage or her garage in the Midwest doing something equally as compelling, I think that day's arriving. And so the question is, then what? So I just think the world's very interesting when we look forward 5 years from now, 10 years, 15 years from now. Some of the content that, my kids are watching and they're showing me on TikTok, some of the generative AI stuff is, that individual, young adults are making. It's incredibly creative, and it's amazing, the stuff, and it is entertaining, and they did it, from their smartphones and their laptops. So this one's a bit scary, and I understand Flip's point, the sky is falling scenario. I don't believe it's falling, but I do think the notion of Hollywood and production is going to change significantly, and it's going to be very profound.
I actually think the cyber films business is going to grow really big with kids from the Midwest making films. I think this is a big deal. Diana, are you here?
Yeah,
I
I'm
agree.
here.
I agree.
I'm here.
Let's put you in.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I agree with a lot of the points that have been said. I would just say I look at it obviously from a vendor perspective, because what we do is we make the tools for creatives to be creative. And so I think at Autodesk, we think about the human skills and the AI skills. And every time I talk to an artist, there's a lot of things that they wish they didn't have to do every day. And I think that's why I look at AI more like an opportunity, because some of those mundane tasks that they do, they want to offload that. I think right now there's a lot of fear in the industry, but I do think that once they start seeing how it can help them, it just gives them more time to be creative. I also think, if I think into the future, I think there will be more content. So I agree there'll be a lot more content creators that can create at a level that, today, it kind of gets democratized, to be honest, right? But you do want that, because ultimately then what that does for the industry is you're just going to create a lot more creative people that can get content out there much faster. Somebody who would be like, hey, I can't make a film because I don't know how to use all these tools and things like that. Like today, they'll be like, hey, I can use these very easy AI tools and create something so it'll only create more people doing content, I think, more than anything else. So from that perspective, that's why I look at, that as an opportunity. And at Autodesk, we're kind of investing in both the human skill and the AI skills, and we don't see them competing, which I think a lot of people are like, hey, AI is going to do it, and so you create this kind of competition between human and AI technology. And for us, we look at it like you can't kind of do one without the other. So
Yeah, I know when we were preparing for this panel, we talked about not AI, but intelligence augmentation.
yeah.
So the idea of something like Maya being augmented by AI, it's absolutely, you're working on it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Bran, you have anything?
Well, thinking about this, I mean, there's another aspect to this. Let's get to the highest level looking down. There are really only three types of filmmaking because there are only really three types of films. The first class is you're trying to emulate reality. So whether it was my term of the century example, you want to make it convincing that you're on the streets of New York in 1900, and you have an audience that may or may not be wanting to suspend their disbelief. And so your challenge is to do that as well as you possibly can. And that's going to be something where AI is going to be incredibly valuable. There's fantasy-based filmmaking where you don't care about reality, you don't care about physics, you don't care about any of those things. You're inventing and creating a world of your own of which there are, no rules, and except the rules you choose to impose. And I think obviously that's an area where it can. At the same time, the third and by far most dominant form of filmmaking is called bad filmmaking. And every film is some combination of those three. You get to decide which. The fact is, we democratized publishing with the internet such that anyone can publish. In my observation, it hasn't done anything to improve the quality of literature. So I haven't seen better books because anyone can do it and so forth. And we now have 100 outlets for news. Most kids and people get their news from social media now and such. And I think that that's done nothing to improve journalism. In fact, it's had the opposite effect. The quality of journalism has gone down, and as has the general appreciation of truth and reality versus fantasy. And so that gets back to what we would call bad newsmaking and so forth. And so, as background, I think there's nothing I see about this trend, an astonishing new set of capabilities, and I'm in great admiration and awe of it, that may do anything to minimize the amount of bad filmmaking that's been done relative to the rest of them. So I think volume and democratization certainly provides opportunities to people who otherwise wouldn't have it, and I think that's great. At the same time, I do think that we need something else, and that something else is where is the passion, the unique skills that only a handful of people have in each of these craft areas necessary to make a film to actually take us to the next level. And my sense is that when you find and identify those people and empower them with these tools, the results can be quite astonishing. But you may also find that a lot of those people resist it just because their sense is they're comfortable with the tools they have. They don't need all this other new stuff, and they're going to do it the way they've done it before. They will die. And then younger, smarter, cooler, funny looking, whatever combination of people will replace them with the next waves and the next generation. And so I think we all have a lot to learn. I think that one of the things that we haven't talked about, which I think is compelling, is the idea that these tools and technologies can actually bring older generations and newer generations together in a way that creates a collaboration which is beneficial to both groups and to the art in general. And so I think that's actually a very exciting aspect of the scalability of tools when it becomes such that you can develop something without having to be a computer scientist or without having to be a highly skilled technician. The challenge is, once again, going back to our architecture example, architecture hasn't gotten better since CAD in general. And in fact, a lot of young architects don't know how to draw. And as a result, the ability of how to get a creative idea out of their head, it tends to be much more rectilinear and much more conformal to what the tool wants to do rather than what a free-flowing brain would want to do. And the workarounds to that are people like Frank Gehry, who embraced CATIA, which was, an aerospace-based tool, which I'm sure people from Dassault will come and hunt me down, but one of the more user-hostile tools I've used architectural design, meaning it's not designed for architecture, and you have to learn how to do it the way Katia wants to do it. That, to me, is the breakthrough that LLMs can bring to a lot of this, is that you don't have to learn the way the coders who put this together thought you should have to interact with it. And often they were not practitioners in the field they're coding for. In fact, most often that's the case.
Almost always not, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that could be revolutionary, is basically saying, well, now you don't need those skills. You don't need a bunch of that. You can just have a dialogue using whatever form you choose to speak in. And whether that's hand gestures or doing this or putting your hand around it and squishing it, doesn't matter. I think that's actually a very exciting possibility to be cross-generational.
Flip, go ahead.
Oh.
Flip.
Oh no, I was just going to say I'm sitting in my office outside a room full of game designers who are pretty hardcore gamers, and I think about that a lot. I mean, Brand and I have spoken about this before, about the tools of architecture being a very interesting equivalent here, and the democratization. I don't know. There were, so there was software to help you build a deck or something, like on the back of your house, software to help you. It certainly helped. Those things certainly helped a certain class of CAD needs, if you will, or just design needs in general. But it didn't help. They may have enabled some of the creativity, but or new types of creativity. That's something that I kind of like to think about. But the one thing that didn't happen with democratization does not necessarily, to echo this, come infinite amounts of greatness. My theory, there's like a conservation of goodness, and the crap side of it expands, in proportion to the availability of the tools. But the amount of stuff that's really good, I don't know, us as humans have the ability. I mean, I'll defer to my colleagues in the deployment universe, but I can't consume. I love the fact that there's a bunch of YouTube, and my God, just consuming that is, I can't imagine people who are able to consume the volume necessary to take advantage of all that that's actually out there. One of the things I want LLMs to do is be a better curator for what I consume, which has been its big, right, suggester systems, or whatever you would like to call them. The reason you show up on Amazon and that thing you're thinking of is right there, or Apple Music is playing the Apple Music thing. That's this, right? And it helps us. It helps me curate my thoughts. It helps me create. And Diana's point about it also helps me do stuff I don't want to do, which is perhaps the best part of it all. I can't get it to do my laundry, though, is like the problem. And it's the stuff that I don't want to do that it can't do that then becomes hyper frustrating, as a tool user. So this is something, this is what I would hope, is to find things that can help it do things that it couldn't ordinarily do, or other strategies for getting those kinds of things done. But yeah, my laundry example is true. I just cannot, it doesn't help me.
You might get a robot to do that in a couple of years.
That'd be fine.
I think that's what they're trying to make you get
Yeah.
soon.
Yeah,
I got one that vacuums my floors, right?
Right. Well,
that's why the price of cars is going way up, because you're not going to buy a car, you're going to have to buy a robot because it's cheaper.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But look, I think that I think we're all saying it. You can't replace the creativity. You can't replace someone who's going to really be good at it and someone who isn't going to be good at it, right? So I think that's why I think creativity cannot be, replaced by AI. I think that, storytelling can't be replaced by AI. Yeah, it can create you a story, but usually you're fixing it. And maybe somebody might like that story that AI has just done for you in chat. But I truly believe that it cannot replace the creatives. And I think that I look at it more like these tools, this technology is more of an assistant, more than anything else. It just helps people, but it will not be what, some amazing people out there know how to do, which is that creativity.
Yeah. So Flip brings up a really good point. There is a tsunami of content that's about to come, that we haven't seen anything yet with Gen AI. And, then you layer in 3D content and things of that nature. But the question now, and I agree, it's the creative, it's the human being, the individual that brings that creativity. But the compelling piece here is that universe of people who get to participate, the democratization that we talk about, that is just going to expand as well. And so to me, what becomes really interesting is there's going to be a lot of schlock out there. That's inevitable, and that's what's going to happen. The bigger challenge is, and I think Flip alluded to it, how do you cut through? How are you going to find that good stuff? Or is it just going to be, is it good to who? It's just going to be niche and something that all of a sudden everyone in the country wants to see. That are those days over? Like the name of a blockbuster film. There'll be a lot of stuff out there, and that's just incumbent upon you to find it and people who share similar interests to you, because it's hopefully AI can help us sort through the good stuff and bad stuff as well. But yeah, it's the ability to cut through is, to me, the part that's most worrisome with all this.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
But don't you find that that's the case today? Like there's
yeah,
so
because you
much
are
stuff out
competing
there.
against, yes,
Right.
and you are competing against YouTube and TikTok, and
Yeah.
and that's why what's and look how challenging it is today, and the amount of content is about to even expand further than what we become accustomed to, and that's the part that's scary. To my point, you haven't seen anything yet. It's a tsunami coming in terms of sheer volume, and so it's the challenges are going to increase.
So most of the streaming channels, they're all really good at telling you, you like this show? How about this next show?
Yeah.
And the real question becomes, do you have to watch all the things they recommend?
Yeah.
Try
not to.
I had that same question with Amazon.
Yeah.
When I first started buying computer science books, it recommended me the next great book to read. And then when I started buying books for my daughter for Christmas, all of a sudden it was recommending books I would never read, but these would be great future presents for her. So it changes. But on the streamers, they know where you are.
God forbid that you ever researched hemorrhoid creams for the rest of your natural life. You're going to be recommended. But, there was an interesting statistic I saw in the trades this morning of how many people who are watching TV videos and all of that, what percentage that is over the air, traditional networks. And as of the Nielsen this week, it's 18% and a few points.
There's still people watching over the air. I'm surprised.
People watching, but and it's just like you look at what was the effect of wireless mobility, what percentage of Americans still have landlines and so forth. So, all of this is coming, and it's inevitable and so forth. But I think to me, the interesting possibility is what emerges that actually has something to do with enabling a new type of creativity that we haven't seen before. And if I knew the definition of that, I'd be working on it. I don't. But the idea is, what can happen now because of this new set of possibilities? And again, we're at the infancies. I mean, I reflect back on Alan Kay's observation years ago when speaking of the computer revolution. And, his message is the computer revolution hasn't happened yet. And I would argue it still hasn't. And the AI revolution hasn't happened yet. And the computer graphics and visual effects resolution hasn't happened yet. We're just at the little tiny ripples at the very beginning. It's just like standing at the ocean watching a sunset, and it's beautiful, and look at the waves breaking and so forth. But this gives you no sense of the enormity of the system called the oceans. And, you can only see 7 miles, and that's it. But you think you have a vision of the future. I would argue that's where we are now. We think we have a vision of the future, but we can only see 5 minutes into the future as compared to where it's heading.
I can see Lake Ontario here, and it might as well be the ocean.
Exactly.
as far as I know. The it gets us very much to the point of uh, the expanse of possible things in filmmaking. Virtual production, that's something that I teach here. And, 5 years ago, we put together a program for virtual production. And now we're in the process of dismantling it because it's just part of production now.
Right.
And this is one of the fastest. I can't think of anything in my life that I've seen happen so quickly. I mean, it's computer, whatever, XYZ, but virtual production now, our students all go out knowing what it is and how to integrate it and what it's good for and what it's bad for, offering it. It's almost like now offering a course in, whatever, developing film, which a whole nother story, but that's a thing too. But it's not that's more of a niche thing now. Same thing with virtual production. It's just getting folded into everything. And it makes me, and again, I know what we're talking about is a slightly different beast. We're talking about AI and, models and things. But I get a feeling that it's just gonna I mean, the same thing with Brand and I talking about special effects, right? I got, servo controllers and things laying around my office, still love to build models and things like that. But computer graphics kind of invaded that turf. People figured out where it's still good and where it's not as good, right? Uh, So I feel like we're maybe at that point, but virtual production being an interesting harbinger of this kind of thing, just for what that's worth.
Yeah, it's funny because at one point going to SIGGRAPH, I was thinking, computer graphics ought to be the subject area, and general computer science should be underneath that. But anyway,
You and
Marlon,
Alvy think this is
I am a longtime friend of Alvy.
yeah.
And Ed Catmull, by the way, as well.
Yeah, no, we all have that same vibe, right? It's like, this is,
Yeah. Marlon, anything you want to put in?
Yeah, no, it's your comment is exactly right. We can't see beyond the horizon, but we can at least see through the horizon, right? So we know directionally where it's going, but beyond that, it's sky's the limit. Obviously, where we're involved in, it's two comments. That's why I like infrastructure, right? Because this train is less a station, generative AI. I'm amazed at how quickly it's commoditized, right? That these tools are so open source and available to anyone, and the ability to monetize that business models change significantly as well. But I like to say you can't AI your way out of infrastructure. So there's some opportunities there, and that's where we're playing. So little plug there. But number two is, Michael, I was talking to you previously about this. How does this change the impact of celebrity? Like, my view is the notion of celebrity is over. The big movie stars we grow up with are done in the future. It's going to be sort of one-offs. It's because the talent is in the person creating it, whether it's, through prompts or commands or whatever, that kid again in the Midwest somewhere. But I just think because of that volume, that tsunami of content, with it becomes a sort of diminished sort of impact that carries over from project to project, I think could have real ramifications. So then if celebrity goes away, what then becomes a celebrity? I think of Mr. Beast, right? Things of that nature, YouTube stars and how they monetize it. So the notion of movie stars, I think, are going to change as well. And I think you're talking about for 100 years that hasn't changed, from the early days of Charlie Chaplin up to recently. I think that's a sea change.
Well,
I watch a guy who picks locks, and all you ever see are his hands. I don't know what he looks like, but he's like an epic celebrity among people who are interested in picking locks. And it's like, hell yes, this is a pair of hands have not been as famous
Correct.
in our lifetime. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that I agree with that perspective, that there won't be celebrities in the future and movie stars and so forth. Because I think one of the appeal is connecting that character to a real person who actually exists that you might get to meet someday, or has a family and has relationships and had a breakup and is on alcohol and now is moved to, ayahuasca and is not, the fact that there are real people with both exciting lives and troubled lives connected to these characters. I don't think that's going away. And I think that there will be characters that are synthetic characters and such that'll be compelling and are capable of, making you laugh, making you cry, and doing all of that. I think that's an adjunct to, I don't think it's a replacement for the notion of the movie star and celebrity, because the fact is people know those aren't real, and that it isn't alive and it isn't experiencing that. And one of the things which is exciting about watching a great actor in a great performance is that you saw them in 5 other movies be completely different characters. And just part of watching them bring a new character to life creates an appeal and an affinity for that character, which makes you want to come back and see them again. So, I think my sense is one is not going to replace the other, but there's a parallel pathway for both. And one of the things that virtual characters will do for you, assuming they get good enough and people learn how to direct them and so on and so forth, is that you're not going to have the same costs involved as you do with celebrities. And that certainly is going to be appealing for a range of productions which simply don't have the option to hire a star. I mean, the same thing was said, there will be no rock stars anymore when music sharing started. But we got just as many rock stars now as we had before. In fact, most of them are like in their 80s and still going, which is comforting to some of us. But for me, I think that this question of connection with real people in the real world, I think that's always going to be compelling to people.
Storytelling isn't going anywhere.
Well,
And there's nothing that LLMs may help with storytelling or help with brainstorm. Storytelling is this kind of fundamental thing that we can augment and change, and maybe some of the narratives and maybe come up with new ways around it. But storytelling as a just a foundational thing is, I don't know, it's like oxygen. So I can't imagine, I can, well, no, I take that back. I can imagine some people's fears are that LLMs are going to take that from us, or that AI is going to take the storytelling from us. But again, back to Brand's point, it's like the narrative of why this person is where this person is in this story. That's the compelling part, and not the fact that we used RenderMan 26, or it's a virtual character, or even if it's a cell drawing of Bugs Bunny. Right? None of this stuff, that stuff, the deployment of the story, interesting. But the stories themselves, that's humanity at its core. So I don't know that it's going to disrupt that.
I find myself sometimes watching a streaming show and getting to the end of a season and going, oh my God, who is the writer for this? I would like to meet and talk to the writer.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the star, but the writer. And I think that, maybe there's some notion of creativity stars or writing stars.
I agree. That's what I was
Yeah.
saying. It's more about the storyteller becomes the celebrity per se. And when I mean celebrity, I want to be, put a fine point on that. Doesn't mean someone's not going to be recognizable, that they're out there, the world knows who they are, a large segment of the population. Okay. What I do mean is that movie star, that glamour, right? It's going to be, people will always be recognizable. But I think that degree of like, oh my God, that's so-and-so and that's so-and-so, I think everyone becomes humanized per se. They're not sort of larger than life. And I agree. I understand the point about more rock stars than ever. It's like, yes and no, there are, but you look at the number of eyeballs that or people watching, during the 80s and 90s versus today, there's still less people are watching them, even though more. So, I just think it impacts what celebrity is and what it's defined. It's just a change in our culture that's going to be reflected through this. And again, I want to be clear. I agree that there's going to be great storytelling and so much content. There's going to be good stuff and bad stuff. It's just thinking how it impacts certain things, that are analogs to the past that will stay true, but things that will change and that aren't. And that was just one of those sort of what I think cultural things that will be impacted. And I agree. Then the storyteller in some sense becomes the celebrity.
Yeah, you could argue that storytelling is in fact the world's oldest profession, contrary to what you may have heard. But I think that, it's interesting to note that when film was popularized, it was predicted that's the end of theater. And there's more theater now than there's ever been. And when television arrived, the notion is this is going to be clearly the end of movies because, why someone go that? And by the way, people are still predicting these things. And so, I think that the thing that one can't stress enough is people feeling the need to be connected with the lives of other people. And one of the things that makes theater compelling, as with regards to cinema and such, is you can be at an extraordinary moment in theater, whether it's a little theater or it's street theater or it's Broadway, and you can experience something that only a handful of people will ever experience. The ephemeral notion of you were there for that moment and you watched this star do this. And, you look at people like my friend Robert Downey Jr. when he did his Broadway show in New York, and we have, this ongoing wave of people performing on Broadway who are traditionally movie stars. It sells out, and there's great, because you want to see them do that live and for real in that other dimension. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how it evolves, but I think there's always going to be that need to feel association with real people in their lives and what they bring to things. I also think what's interesting is that so many of the new technologies aren't new technologies. They're simply new implementations of older ones. So, we talk about the fact that we now have LED and LCD screens and such doing it, which is great. And now that we have screens like the Sony things, which are amazing with extraordinary contrast ratios so that spill light on them doesn't affect them and that. It has the great effect as compared to working against a blue screen of the actors can actually see the environment they're in and see the character rather than someone holding up a stick with an X on it. And the notion is that's your eye line to the creature from Gorgon. Now you can see the creature from Gorgon or an animatic of the creature from Gorgon or something. At the same time, let us not forget that blue screen was the intermediate and all of those traveling mats, Ultimate digital things of what was process projection. And, the fact is we got away from process projection because you could do things quality-wise that you couldn't do otherwise. Well, now we're back to effectively what was called process projection to do it. So a lot of these ideas have been around for a long time, but now all of a sudden they've gotten good or they've become something which are empowering from a tool perspective in a way that you couldn't do before. And that's always exciting.
I was thinking about Michael's point about the writer, and coming from a family of musicians, I will tell you that thinking about here in Rochester, right? The Rochester Symphony is not composing their own music in general, and same kinds of things, right? Jazz performers, there are standards in that universe, and the people who wrote them, it's the interpretation then becomes part of it, and then the creation of the thing in the first place. So there's room for all of that. That was going to be my first point, which it's a really good point that Michael made. And then just to follow up on Brand's point, the No, I'm not going to do it. I'm sorry. We're hurting on time. Go ahead. I'll compose.
Diana, any last minute?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, look, I think that when I hear a lot of the examples, I feel like we've been dealing with this change, right? There's the internet, there's the blue screens, there's we talk about synthetic characters, we talk about cartoons, like they became stars, right? Like Mickey Mouse and all those other things. So I just think I agree. Like I think it's just going to be at a different level, and it's really going to be the continuing to try to get people to watch the content or engage in the content. But I absolutely agree that there's an emotional connection that can't be replaced.
And I think I should wrap this up. I do believe celebrity is going to stick around, as I'll put in the 5 point. At the last 19 years living in downtown Los Angeles in the Pacific Electric building. And the most exciting thing for me was when I moved in, Kerry Washington was shooting an episode of Scandal in the restaurant on the first floor of my building. And when I moved out, it was just after Colin Farrell shot the TV series Sugar, where the person who was found dead in the trunk of their car was shot in my parking structure of my building. So I think celebrity is natural, especially for someone who lives in or grows up in Los Angeles. And that is why there is massive tourism to there. And large language models will not change that, I believe. I agree with Brian.